Hi class, this is Dr. Karsten, and right now I am doing Lesson 13, Part 2, Problem Set, from Module 5, Grade 4 of EngageNY Math. I apologize that we had another glitch with the software, and the last third of the lesson got cut off in the previous video. So I'm going to relabel that as Video Part 1. This is going to be Video Part 2. If you have not yet watched Part 1 from Lesson 13, please go back and do that because that explains the lesson and it also shows you how we got to this point in problem number 1 from the problem set. So again, if you didn't watch Part 1 of Lesson 13, please X out and go watch that and then come back and join us because I'm going to jump right into this and where we left off. So the place that we left off with this problem was that we had placed the fractions 4/3, 11/6, and 17/12 on our number line. And the very last thing we had done was we had placed the 17/12 right here. We knew it was going to be a little bit less than 1 1/2 because half of 12 is 6. We had 6/12. And so we knew 5/12 is less than 6/12, but very close. It's 1/12 away. So we put 1 1/12 right here, just a little bit to the left of 1 1/2, a little bit less. So now what we have to do for problem number 2 is we are going to compare two fractions. And that's why I have these, because I did this last night when I made the video, but clearly it had a little glitch. So let's take a look at this. I have 1 5/6, and I have 1 5/12. Which one is larger? Let's go ahead and take a look at our number line. So 1 5/6 is over here, and 1 5/12 is right here. So clearly 1 5/6 is the larger fraction. So if I pop this off, there you have the answer. The alligator eats the bigger number, and it's going to definitely pick 1 5/6. Let's do the same thing for 1 1/3 and 1 5/12. 1 1/3 is right here, 1 5/12 is right here. So now 1 5/12 is the larger fraction. It's closer to the 2, or you could say it's further away from the 1. And so if we take a look, the alligator is going to eat the larger number, and it's going to eat 1 5/12. Okay, I'm going to let you, for your classwork, you're going to do problems 3 and 4 on your own. But before I leave this video, we're going to do a couple of the examples from number 5, because I really want to make sure that you guys are feeling good about how we do these. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at 5A. So if I'm looking at 5A, I can see that I have 3/8 and I have 7/12. Neither of these is a fraction greater than 1. They are both fractions that are less than 1. Now, I know that those are really tiny to look at, and that's because I had to be able to have the entire number line in, and I don't want to move the camera around, and I do want to have a little bit more room to work. So I'm going to take a piece of paper out to work on for this problem. Hopefully I'll be able to keep it in frame. So we are comparing 3/8 and 7/12. Now I know we're not really supposed to be using a number line, but for teaching purposes, I do want to really quickly get back into this number line and use it just so you guys can see where things would fall on a number line and how we would understand this. Because we're supposed to be describing things in terms of, like, for example, how many 8ths away it is from something or how many 12ths away. Remember that 8ths are going to be bigger pieces than 12. If I share a cake with 8 people, if 8 of us are sharing, my slices are bigger than if I have to share that cake amongst 12 people. Okay, so let's do a quick number line. Now, because this one is going to be, I'm going to move this over, because this one is, these are both fractions less than 1, I'm going to use my benchmarks of 0, 1/2, and 1 whole. If I'm working with 3/8, what I want to do is I want to look at those 8ths. Let me rewrite my benchmark as 8ths to really help us understand it. So if I rewrote 0 as 8ths, I would have 0/8. If I rewrote 1 as 8ths, I would have 8/8, because remember, when my numerator and denominator match, it's just equal to 1 whole. Think of that cake. If I cut it into 8 slices, but I have all 8 slices, then that's equal to 1 whole. Denominator is the number of pieces that make up a whole. 8 is the number of pieces that you have. Okay, so now let's look at the half. If I have a half, what is half of 8? Well, half of 8 is 4. So now I know that 4/8 is equivalent or equal to 1/2. So now I know that 3/8 is fewer, it's 1/8 less than 4/8. where would I put that on here? I'm going to grab my pencil because I don't want to make dark marks right now on my paper. But if I were to put my eighths in here, I could say that I would have 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. So I can see I'd have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I now know that 3/8 is going to be right about here. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on our number line. And the way to describe 3/8 on the number line is to say that 3/8 is 1/8 away from a half, because 3/8 and 4/8, the difference is 1/8. So 3/8 is 1/8 less than a half. Now let's go ahead and take a look at 7/12. If I wanted to look at these benchmarks, I'm just going to erase this so our page is a little bit less confusing, a little bit more clear. So if I have 12ths, let's turn our benchmarks into 12ths. So I'd have 0/12, 12/12, and again, half of 12 is going to be 6. So now that 6/12 is equivalent to 1/2. So where would 7/12 go? Well, 7/12 is going to be 1/12 more or greater than 6/12. And I know that 12ths are smaller pieces than 8ths, so I'm going to put it closer than that 1/8 would be. So I don't know, maybe right about here. So again, this is 1/8 away from a half, this is 1/12 away from a half, but 8ths are bigger, so it's further away than 7/12, which is going to be a little closer. But more importantly, they're on opposite sides. So if I wanted to describe this, let's go back to our page. So here's our problem right here. So what we know is 7/12 is larger than 3/8. It's closer to 1. So I'm going to first show that the alligator's eating the bigger number. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to describe it. Well, again, my 3/8 was 1/8 less than a half. Let's talk about their relationship to a half. So 3/8 is 1/8 less than a half. And I can similarly describe my 7/12, that my 7/12, and I can slide this up a little, that 7/12 was 1/12 more than a half. So 7/12 is 1/12 more than a half. So that would be the explanation part of this. Let's do another one, and I'm probably going to do, I have a meeting in about 45 minutes, so I have time to do about 2 more problems and upload this for you guys so you have it, because it's getting late into the afternoon. So let's take a look at B. So if I'm looking at problem B, sorry about that, let me move it, center it a little bit more for us. So now we have 5/12 and we have 7/8. And again, these are fractions that are less than 1. So actually, you know what? I think that I'm going to let you guys work on that one on your own, because that's going to be very similar to A. Let's jump into a problem where we have it as a fraction that is actually greater than 1. So let's take a look at C. I'll move this up a little. So for problem C, you can see that we have 8/6 and we have 11/12. So I'm grabbing us a piece of paper. I hate using the paper, but I get too much glare off the whiteboard. So I'm going to be comparing, for 5C, I'm going to be comparing 8/6 and 11/12. So if I'm comparing 8/6 and 11/12, how can I compare those? Well, remember what we were doing with our 8/6. If I have a fraction that's greater than 1, and we know this one is because 8 is larger than 6, what I can do is I can pull out wholes. I can pull out my, I can pull out 6/6 from that, because I know that 6/6 is equal to 1 whole. And then I can see what I have left. Well, 8 minus 6 is going to leave me with 2/6. Remember, the 6 are a label. They're telling us how large the sizes of the pieces are. So I'm saying I have 8 pieces in total, and 6 of them are over here, and 2 of them are over here. 6 plus 2 is 8. So 8/6 minus 6/6 is 2/6. Remember that this 6/6 is equivalent to 1. So I have 1 and 2/6. So that would be another way to write that. So where am I going to put that on a number line? How is that going to look? Sorry, I'm trying to keep everything in frame and have enough room to do my work. So let's try putting that on a number line. So for this one, I'm going to have, I need to definitely have, because this is a fraction less than 1, so I'm going to go ahead and put my 1 benchmark right in the middle. I'm going to put my 0 right here, and I'm going to put my 2 over here. Where is 8/6 going to fall? Well, it's going to be 2/6 greater than 1. So it's going to be 1, so I go to 1, and then I'm going to go to 2/6. And I know 2/6 is going to be right about, if this were 1.5, 2/6 is going to be a little bit less than that. And I know that because 1 3/6 would be a half. And I know that I talked about that a lot in Google Meet today. But anyway, so I'm going to put it right here. And that's enough for this problem to know that 8/6 or 1 2/6 is right here. Well, what about 11/12? I see that 11/12 is really close to 12/12. It's just 1/12 smaller. 12ths are really teeny weeny pieces, so that's going to be super duper close to this 1, but it's going to be a little less than 1 because 11/12 is it hasn't reached that 12/12 yet. So I'm going to put it right here, and I'll write 11/12 here. So now what I can see is that 8/6 is definitely larger than 11/12. 8/6 is greater than 1, 11/12 is smaller than 1. That would be a really easy way to describe that. So let's go ahead and put this into our page where I can say that 8/6 is greater than 11/12. And if I want to describe that, I can just simply say that 8/6 is greater than 1. Move this out of the way. So I can say 8/6 is greater than 1. And I can also say that 11/12 is less than 1. And you could have said more, smaller. And this is a nice easy problem because actually I'm going to say this is greater than 1, this is less than 1. I know which one's bigger. So that would be a super easy problem to do. Okay, so here we are again going with two fractions that are less than 1. So maybe let's pick one more where we actually have two fractions that are greater than 1. So let's do 1e together. And for those of you who were in the Google Classroom with me, we actually did this one together earlier. And this will give us a chance to review our fifths, which you know I love to review those fifths and those thirds and where they belong on a number line. So let's go ahead and I'm going to grab another piece of paper and let's take a look and we're going to compare 7/5 and 11/10. So if I'm comparing 7/5 and 11/10, I can see that both of these are fractions that are greater than 1. I see that because the numerator is larger than the denominator. So what I want to work on doing is pulling out that one whole. So if I want to pull out one whole from 7/5, I'm going to pull out 5/5. We always look at our denominator. So that's equal to one whole. And 7 minus 5 is 2/5. So now what I see is that 5/5 plus 2/5 is 7/5, or 7 of these pieces minus 5 of those pieces gives me 2 of those pieces. And now I can turn that into a mixed number, which is going to be 1, because this is 1, and 2/5. That's another way to write 7/5. So now let's take a look at 11. Well, let's go ahead and put this on here. While we're thinking about this, let's go ahead and put that on our number line. So I'm going to draw out my number line. Now, since both of these, I got to move it up for you. So since both of these fractions are greater than 1, I'm going to start my number line at 1. And I'm going to put the other end of it is going to be 2. And right in the middle is going to be 1.5. So these are our benchmarks that we're using. And because things might get a little messy, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to circle those just so that they stay fresh. And we know exactly where those benchmarks are. So I like to make them green or some other color. Green is just handy right now. So 1 and 2/5. So I already have my 1. This is my 1. My 0 is way down there somewhere. But my 1 is right here. So I already have 1. I just have to figure out where would that 2/5 fall on this number line. So I know that this is 1 and 0/5. I know that this is not going to actually work because remember, fifths are funky. They don't actually fall at 1/2. But I do know that this would be like 1 and 5/5. So let's think about those fifths. And I'm going to go in underneath, I'm going to draw a really quick sketch for where our fifths would fall on a number line. So remember, when we have fifths on a number line, we would have our, in this case it's going to be 1 and 2. Usually we'd have 0 and 1. And the way that fifths fall is they fall a little differently. They fall kind of, it's a little uneven. I apologize that it's not perfect. These should have been a little bit closer together. But these are our fifths. So this would be 1 and 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and then we get up to 5/5 would be right here. And that 1/2 would go right about here. So the way we describe our fifths, remember, is that 1/5 is closer to, this is 1 in this case, or 0, it's closer to this end. 2/5 is still between these two benchmarks, but it's closer to the 1/2 mark. 3/5 is between 1/2 and the next whole number, but it's closer to the half. And 4/5 is between 1/2 and the next whole number, but it's going to be closer to the next whole number. So, with that in mind, if I have 1 and 2/5, that's going to be right about here, because I would have 1 and 1/5, 1 and 2/5, 1 and 3/5, 1 and 4/5, and 1 and 5/5. But 1 and 5/5 is just going to be 2 because that's a whole nother whole. So I'm going to put my 1 and 2/5 right here. I could also label it as 7/5. So now let's figure out where we are going to put our 11/10. So again, I want to pull out a whole out of that. And to make a whole, I know that 10/10 is 1 whole. So now I need to know, what do I have left? So I have 11 of these sized pieces. I took out 10 of them. That leaves me 1 of those sized pieces. And the size is tenths. Those are all tenths. 10 plus 1 is 11. 11 minus 10 is 1. Let's convert this now into a mixed number. 10/10 is the same thing as saying 1, and then I have 1/10. So 11/10 is the same thing as 1 and 1/10. Let's figure out where that's going to go on our number line. So remember, this is 1. Tenths are really small pieces, and I only have 1 of them. So that's telling me it's going to be really close to 1. So this is where I'm going to put 1 and 1/10, or 11/10. Think about that. If I were to put all my tenths on here, I'd have 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10. This is going to be 5/10. This would be 1 and 5/10. And then I'd have 1 and 6/10 way over here. And I don't know if you can see that. I'll scooch it up. I'm sorry, 1 and 10/10. Oh my goodness, I was just counting. 1 and 10/10 would be way down here. So again, 0/5, 5/5, 5/5. Very good. Oh my goodness. This would be 1 and 0/10. I was going back to my fifths. This would be 1 and 5/10, 1 and 10/10. So 1 and 1/10 is going to be right here. It's really close to this end of it. So with that written, let's go ahead now and take a look at what the problem was in the problem set. And it was asking us to compare 7/5 and 11/10. Well, here's 11/10 and here's 7/5. Oops, you can't see them. Sorry. Here we go. So here's 11/10 and here's 7/5. So clearly 7/5 wins for this problem. It is a bigger number. The alligator's going to eat it, which I guess means that it's actually not winning. Because if you're getting eaten by an alligator, that's not fun. So there we go. We have 7/5 is greater than 11/10. So now what we have to do is we have to think about how are we going to explain that. And one nice easy way that I could actually explain that, and let's look at this again, is I could just say that 11/10 is closer to 1. That would be a great way. or that 7/5 is closer to 1.5. But I'm just going to go ahead and say that. This is reasoning. I'm going to say that 11/10 is closer to 1 because it's closer to 1 than 7/5 was. So that means that it's smaller since we're looking at two numbers that both fall between 1 and 2. Okay, I hope that this is starting to make sense for you. For your work that you are going to be doing right now, you can do again on the first page, you can do problems number 3 and 4, and then you can finish out problem number 5, which means you're going to do B, D, F, G, H, I, and J. So I'm going to get this posted right now after it formats itself. I hope everything's going great. Happy birthday to our one friend who has a birthday today. And I will see you all back in our Google Classroom. Have a great day.